Hello minions, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be covering how to draw grids and what problems that you're going to face when you actually do them, depending on what your picture looks like. Now the picture I have here is a still life, and before you do anything you want to make sure that your paper that you are drawing from and the paper that you're going to be drawing on are relatively the same shape. Because if you have a picture that's a perfect square and then you have a piece of paper you're drawing on that is a rectangle, that's not really going to work, basically, because if you're going from a square to a rectangle, it's going to elongate that picture and it's not going to look right. The same way as if you were going from a rectangular picture into a more square piece of paper, you're going to squish everything, and again, it's not going to turn out the way you hope. So first thing you're going to need to check is to make sure, oh, is this going to be rectangle or square? So this is going to be about 14, 1, 2, 3 centimeters. And then you have about 11.1 centimeters. So this is more of a rectangular drawing, which is good because my paper is also a rectangular shape. Now, once you are done with that, you're going to need to measure, which we have already done, the sides of your picture. Now, when you're doing a grid, you really have to decide what kind of grid do you want. The more detailed your picture is, the more grid lines you want to have. If it's not that detailed, then the less grid lines you need. So the grid lines, I would not ever do less than 3 grid lines, and technically I generally don't go farther than 8, just for my personal sanity. So you have to decide, which one are you going to do? Are you going to do 3? Are you going to do 6? Are you going to do 8? Now for this one, it's not particularly complicated, but there are a lot of tiny little details that I might want later. So for this one, I think I'm going to do maybe like a 5 or a 6. Now that I've decided what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to take my numbers that I have measured on each side and I'm going to divide them by how many grid lines that I want. Now I'm going to be doing 6 because why not? So now I have to go get my calculator so I can divide this, because I am not a mathematician by any means. All right. Now that I have my calculator, I'm going to take my big number and divide it by how many grid lines that I want. So if I want 6 grid lines, I have to divide my numbers by 6. So 14.3 divided by 6 is 2.4 centimeters. All right, and I do the same thing over here. 11.1 divided by 6 is 1.9 centimeters, and I'm rounding it up because math. All right, now what we do with those numbers is that we take our trusty rulers, and every 2.4 centimeters, I make a little line. So 2.4, 2.4, 2.4, 2.4, 2.4, and of course if I go all the way to the end, that's 2.4 centimeters. Now I have to do the same on the bottom for my connecting lines, and now I just connect them like so. Like that. But we are not done. We have to go to the other side. Now we have to do 1.9. So here I do 1.9, 1.9, 1.9, 1.9, 1.9, and of course if I move this over here I have 1.9 centimeters. And then I go down here to the bottom again and do the same thing. And then of course, like we did before, we are going to draw our lines and connect the dots, so to speak. And you always want to use a ruler or a straight edge. Don't just look at it and go by eye and say this is good enough, because no, it is not good enough. Use a ruler. Rulers are your friends. So now I have a grid of 6 by 6. Is that all? Is that done? Is it as easy as that? No, it is not. Now we get to do the fun stuff. Now that we have done the grid onto our printed out image, we have to create the grid for where we are drawing on our drawing piece of paper. So we have to do the same thing that we did for our regular image. We have to take the measurements of the paper and then divide them by our grid lines. Okay, so 29, 5, 6, 7, 29.7 centimeters this way. And then I have 20.9 centimeters down. And this is the trick. If you divide your image by 6, you must divide your picture that you are drawing on, the drawing paper, whatever you're using, also by the same number. Because if you divide this by 6 and you only divide this by 3, it's not going to work. So, however many grid lines you draw on here, you have to draw on your paper. So, I'm going to take these measurements and I am going to divide them by 6, just as we did before. So, this rounds up to 5 centimeters. And 3.5 centimeters. You can do this by inches or whatever unit of measurements that you want, but I am using centimeters just because it is easier for me. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. All right, and then I do the same down here. And when you're doing this, make sure the 0 is on the very edge of your paper, because if it's over the edge or if it's under the edge, you're not actually measuring the correct amount that you need. So you have to be careful. So just like you're in shop class, measure twice, cut once, because this is really annoying if you have to do it multiple times. So be very careful the first time and we won't have any problems, or not that we are not going to have problems, but we'll have less problems. How about that? We'll just have less problems. All right, there we go. And then like before, we match and slide. We match and slide. Oop, you can see I got a little off. So don't be afraid to erase and go back, okay? This is why we use pencil. Nothing is set in stone. We can erase our mistakes up to a point. You get the baseline down first, and then there's nothing to worry about later. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Awesome. Now we're going to do the other side, which is going to be 3.5 centimeters. So that's what I'm going to do. And you notice here in my paper, there's a little line. So if I decide to rip out my paper later, this will be the edge of my paper, not over here. So when I'm making my lines, I make sure my 0 is lined up with this edge of the paper, because here is the actual edge of my paper when I rip it out of my sketchbook, not over here. So again, be careful when you are drawing on your paper. All right, so now we're doing 3.5. So 3.5. All right, now that we got that, we are going to measure. And draw a line, again with my handy dandy trusty ruler. If you don't have a long ruler, what I would suggest you do in this case is draw to a line, like as far as you can. Like if your ruler only goes to like 15 centimeters and you can only reach here, I would draw the straight line down to as far as it can reach on this line, and then bring it down and then draw it the rest of the way. That way you don't have iggly wibbly wobbly lines, because we don't like those kind of lines here. All right, and now you can see I have a 6x6 grid. Awesome, we are amazing, are we not? Okay, now that is the hard part. Now is down to the easy part. Math is over. Yes, we can begin art class now. You will notice that I am going to label my squares. So I'm going to label the top A, B, C, D, E, F. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the same up here. I have A, B, C, D, E, F. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This way, I don't get lost when I'm trying to redraw. Whatever goes in one F goes in one F. Whatever goes in one E goes in one E. And as you can see right now, E and F is just the background. So I don't have to draw anything in those two places. But here, when I have in one D, I have this. So now I'm going to have to draw this part here. And I'm going to see how much space does this take up. So I can draw everything into proportion correctly. And then this comes about like right here. So that's going to come right here. And then I have this little part here. So I can see how small it is. So something like that. And that is what I'm going to do for all my squares. I'm going to look and I'm going to draw until it's exactly what it is on my printed out picture. So just bear with me as I do that. And always keep looking back at your drawing. Never just look at your paper, because your paper, if you're just relying on what you remember, that's not going to work, because your brain lies to you, your eyes lie to you. You are not going to remember correctly. So every time you draw, look here, look back, look here, look back, look here, look back. Always keep checking yourself, because you're not going to remember what it looks like. It's like reading and vocabulary. You haven't built up your vocabulary in art yet. And references are key. If you don't have a reference, it's not going to work, especially if you haven't been studying that particular image or that particular thing to know it backwards and forwards. And anyone who says that you don't need a reference is lying to you, and you can ignore those people. Okay. And don't get stuck into one spot, because right here I was like, ooh, I'm gonna do here, but the rest of my picture isn't drawn, so I can't focus on that specifically right yet. And you can see that I'm not drawing anything yet. I'm just filling out where everything's going to go. So they can't exceed this space. This is where they live. So now I have to go in and put everything in its place. And you can see my lines here are not straight, they are curved because the object that I am drawing is curved. So when an object is curved, the shadows and anything on it will take on that curved edge. So don't make straight lines on a curved object. That's not how any of this works. All right, now I'm going to put in the edge of the table. And the edge of the table kind of appears and disappears here. And then here as well. And then down here, all that's going to be is black. All right, now that you have this, there's one thing we need to do before we erase the grid lines. What we need to do is we need to find the values of our picture. Now, you should know that values are how light or how dark a color is. And there are many different types of values, but I generally go from about 8 to 0 or 6 to 0. For here, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to go from 6 to 0. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. 0 is the whitest white. It is the color of our paper. Nothing can get brighter than that. 6 is our darkest black. So basically, nothing can get darker than this. Depending on the picture that you chose, depends on the values that you're going to use. You might not have a 6. You might not have a 0. It's basically all what you picked. I'm going to choose a different pencil. That's an HB. I need a darker pencil, something that fills in a little bit better. Where's my 5 HB? Okay. Something that gets dark. So here is my 6. Nothing can get darker than this. And then I slowly start to lighten up. You can see that it is dark, but it is not as dark as my 6, but it's darn close. And then I have my 4. And then I have my 3. Then I have my 2. Then I have my 1. like that basically. I'll go into values later, but this is a very quick one. Now, whatever I numbered my darkest color, I'm going to go in and I'm going to outline all my values that I see here on my picture. So any color differentiation that I see on anything, I'm going to go in and I'm going to draw around. This will help me when I am placing my values later. Now, if it's weird and you can't tell the difference between the values, you got to squint your eyes a little and make it a little fuzzy. And people who have glasses like me, you all know all about the fuzzy. So this is the one time when having glasses is a win. You can just take off your glasses and you can see the differences in the value and the value shapes that they make. So that's what we're doing. You're going to just go over all the different value colors that you see. All right. And don't forget, you also have a background. You have different values depending on your background. As you can see here, on this table, you have shadows and light areas. And even here in my background, I see different values. So go ahead and look at that. Alright, once you have your values all circled and found, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to your numbered value lines and you're going to take these numbers and you're going to number these. And you're going to say, okay, which one is my darkest black? My darkest black is here. What does that color look like on my value scale? That looks like a 6. Look how dark that is. That's a 6. So basically I go and I number it a 6 and I do the same thing here on my drawing. But before I can do that, I have to go in and draw these value shapes on top of my grid. Alright, so I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use my grid to help me fill in my values. Now that I have my value shapes, I can just go in and I can draw them like that. This will help you when we are coloring. Okay. Alright, now that you have done drawing all your value shapes onto your paper, you will see that the next step is taking the value scale where you've numbered it from darkest to lightest and applying those value numbers onto your value shapes, because whatever is a 6 needs to be labeled as a 6 and whatever is a 0 needs to be labeled as a 0. This will help you when you are doing your coloring process, like I said before. Now, once everything is done and you've labeled everything, even in your background, then you need to erase your grid lines. So you can see where I've erased my grid lines, and over here where it's not quite gone yet, that's fine. As long as the grid lines are not showing by the end of the project, you can like slowly erase them while you fill in your drawing with color later, because eventually these lines will be blended into the drawing when you're done, or you can get really close and erase them once you've applied the color. So now all you need to do is check and make sure that your drawing is in proportion to the printed out picture that you did before. If it's not, then you need to go back and check where it went wrong, because you cannot fix it once you start coloring. You cannot hide bad proportion behind color. Believe me, I've tried. It doesn't work. So go back, check it, make sure that you have everything in proportion, make sure you have everything labeled, make sure you have everything drawn. Once that is done, we can go on to the next step, which is color swatching. All right, see you guys in the next video. Bye.